Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Tech Tuesday. This is my first, I think been gone for 2 weeks now from both our live streams. Got the flu, turned into pneumonia. I am getting better. I'm excited to be back, still not working real hard. I'm going to go to bed right after this. I got a couple calls, but anyway, today my guest is Jane Nam. She is the founder and leader of the AgeTech Journal, and we are going to have an amazing conversation right after this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. Jane, welcome to Tech Tuesday. I am so excited about being able to talk to you. I want to start with who you are, what the AgeTech Journal is, and what you're working on, what you're passionate about.
Well, first, thank you so much for having me, Steve. I can't remember the last time I was in the hot seat. I'm usually the one asking the questions. So excited to be here. Hi, everyone. I'm Jane Nam. I'm the founder of AgeTech Journal. AgeTech Journal is really an intelligence hub for AgeTech. So we're tracking, mapping who's in the space, who's coming in the space, what categories are hot. So it's really a data center, really, for anyone building or investing in AgeTech.
Okay. And why did you do this?
I think, first, it's such a mission-driven industry. I think everyone in this field is just really happy to be here. And it's personal, you have grandparents, you have parents who are aging, and you start thinking about you yourself and what kind of life you want when you're at that chapter of life. And so I think, everyone's just very motivated to be in the field, and I'm the same.
Cool. So you recently attended back in I guess it's been a little over a month now, right? The Longevity Summit in Washington, D.C. that my friend Mary Furlong produced. And you wrote about it, and there were two quotes that really stood out that you put in that I'd like to dig into a little bit. So the first one is this. Nancy Lamont said from AARP says, the home is the new care setting. Okay, and then Mary Lazar, is that correct? Says our system cannot accommodate all the people who want to age at home. What is the right answer? What do we do with this? And honestly, the question I want to know is home actually the right place for people to be?
Yeah, I think that's a huge theme going into 2026. That's really going to affect innovation. The first of the boomers turned 80 this year. So the silver tsunami really starts in 2026, and that's the starting point. I think we can expect a lot of age tech startups to really start crowding around products and services that promote better living in the home for older adults and their caregivers. And frankly, we just have a system that can't support the influx of older adults coming in. And so I think founders can really find solutions from two sides. One, founders are really working at the home setting space, and then also a lot of founders are working in senior living to cut down on operational costs. So it's not really one or the other. I think founders are really having to attack the problem from both ends.
Okay, so one of the things is I've been looking at age tech for a long time. I remember going to one of Mary's very early to me, probably 10 years ago, her West Coast age tech conference, and they were going to have a pitch event. And I was so excited about all the great stuff I was going to see. And I walked away so disillusioned. Most of the stuff I just shook my head at. Couple of things I thought, well, they might be mildly interesting. I'm not sure that any of them exist today. Probably the biggest failure I've seen in the age tech space from early on was this is probably well, I'm going to go this way. There are a bunch of companies, including AARP, who created a bunch of senior specific dumbed down tablets because older people weren't smart enough to use regular tablets. They all failed. Actually, there may be one that's still out there, but mostly they've all failed because everybody was just using, the older people were using what everybody else was. But my bigger question is this, is I look at AgeTech, I'm very worried that rather that the big motivator is the pocketbooks of older people rather than solving problems. Any thoughts on that?
Sorry, the pocketbooks are.
Yeah, that's what's happening is that angel investors, VCs, and even entrepreneurs are looking at this and say, "Man, look at all those boomers! I can make a fortune out of that."
Mm-hmm.
The primary motivation is extracting cash rather than solving problems.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a hard space to build in. I think, well, first, the sales cycle is so slow. There's no real single archetype of user. It's when you think about the market and the market opportunity, it's huge. By 2050, we can expect this to be a $118 trillion market. So, when we think about the numbers, I think it's really easy to have that, attract founders into the space. But building in it, I think, is just a whole nother story.
So as I look at this, one of the things that I could, and I've sort of touched on this already, and you've kind of addressed it, but I'm really concerned that, well, I'm actually going to go a different direction. I'm a family caregiver. I care for my 93-year-old stepfather. He lived with us until about 6 months ago. We recently moved him into a residential care home. And the biggest reason we moved him was because caring for him was killing him. Rephrase that, was killing us. He was not getting as good a care as he would in a care home, but mostly we had 50 or 60 things we had to do for him every day, little things.
Yeah.
And when I look at the current AgeTech ecosystem right now, it seems like everything is focused on the resident and not the family caregiver.
Yeah. Well, I think going into 2026, this will really be the year of the caregiver rebrand, because we've long dismissed caregivers as informal helpers of some kind and not as legitimate workforce or as an official provider group. And the reframing, and we will need to reframe it given the urgency and gravity of the situation, which I'll touch on later, will affect the way we really think about policy, tax credits, protections, institutional support, and give the proper visibility to caregivers that they deserve and are calling for. And in a big sense, caregiving plays a big role in determining workforce stability. So this is not just some small issue. When you have a huge demographic unable to do their work, and 1 in 4 American adults are caregivers, because of the constant stress, exhaustion, and burnout, you don't have a stable workforce. So 2026 will really be the year where caregiving will no longer be this future problem. It affects too many Americans, especially working Americans. And while this work must be done at the intersection of policymaking and founders, I think, 2026 will really see this reframing of the issue. And I think your personal story is just a great example of it's the story of millions, So I think 2026 will really see a shift in that kind of in the topic.
Well, one of the things that's very fortunate for us is we have plenty of financial resources, and so we're not worried about budget. I will tell you, we've used some home care agencies for very short terms. When we were going away for a weekend, or a little over a year ago, we went to Seattle for Christmas with family. He went with us, but couldn't go out on some outings. And so we brought people in. Paying for it was fine. And the people who came in to do the care, they were lovely people, but they were first generation immigrants. They did an amazing job of care. They look for extra things to do. We'd come back and find the floors mopped and the dishes washed and everything put away. And that was all really lovely. But they didn't really have the communication skills, the education level to provide much more than just the caregiving. How do we get past that? And what role does technology play in that?
Well, I think tech can always play a role and will always play a role in affordability and accessibility and making that better for all, caregivers. And we see startups like Carryoyo, and I know you had Neil Shaw on the
Yeah.
podcast a few weeks back, but that's just a great example of a reason I think to be optimistic about where tech can bring us in connecting the right skill sets with the right demographics. So yeah, I think tech and especially with AI will really accelerate this process of making caregiving more accessible, more affordable, and just bringing a higher level of caregiving to the general public.
Cool. So I want to talk a little bit more about policy, and I want to get into kind of some of the things that you think are working, some of the things are not. Of course, it used to be a long, long time ago, families just took care of their own. And we've had two major societal shifts, right? Two people working instead of one person working in the family, which is one of those. And the other is that we older people are just living a lot longer. And because we're living longer, even though we might have longer health spans, we're also having longer unhealth spans, which requires more care. So
Yeah.
I want to talk first about policy. What needs to change, and maybe what's working from a policy standpoint?
Yeah, well, earlier last year in March, there was an act that was introduced, the Credit for Caring Act, and that was going to give up to $5,000 tax credit to working caregivers, and that bill is stuck. There has been no movement since it was introduced. I think, yeah, I'm not sure there's a lot of reason to be optimistic that we'll see change from the policy making side first. So I think in that way, it really is up to the founders and the startups in the AgeTech space to really be tackling this head on. And of course, the solution is going to be intersectional. We're going to need policymakers at some point, but I think this is just a small example of how slow moving that decision making is going to be. And so that's why I think, yeah, there needs to be a lot more. Well, we will see a lot of innovation from the founder side.
Okay, great. So we're gonna play a little game here. We're going to elect Jane as the United States aging policy czar in the United States. Okay. So, what are you going to change?
I think, well, first of all, I think this will happen regardless of policy, but companies offering benefits to caregivers, I think it's actually just going to have to be something that happens anyways, because of just 1 in 4 American adults being caregivers. That's a huge portion of the workforce. That means that this is something that companies won't be able to ignore. So the companies that really tackle this first, I think will first they'll see better, they'll attract better candidates to their companies, and so I think from the first thing is really change at the conditions for caregivers, especially in the workforce, will be something that I would hope changes first.
Great, perfect. So you're tracking hundreds and hundreds of AgeTech startups. What do you and you feel free to even name some companies that you really like. I'm going to talk to you about some things that are not necessarily working so well. You don't have to name those companies. But when you see things that are coming out there, what's some of the technology that's got you really excited as being able to solve real problems?
Well, really, when I look at founders apart from the product itself, I think I really think about how they're thinking about the media in their business, whether they're clearly articulating the product or service that they're offering, and whether they're able to really say their story in a way that reaches people. So I think founders who have successfully been doing that are really in a good place. And I'm also really a big fan of just fun companies. So for example, Cadence by Johannes Stauer, he makes fall prevention sneakers, and they look just like any other mainstream top tier brand of shoes. And just the way that he's thinking about design, the aesthetics of his product really seriously, I think, yeah, I'm just such a fan of that, because why would you suddenly want something boring and something that you don't want to use magically suddenly you want something beige and boring, in the later half of your life. And so I just love founders who are really experimental, really thinking about the story part of their business, and they're really thinking about the aesthetics, design, and the desirability of their products and services.
So I absolutely love this, because when I go to trade shows, and I found this to be true when I was at the AARP AgeTech Pavilion in Las Vegas a few weeks ago, I'd be walking through the pavilion and I'd see some company with something there, and it would be like, I'm looking at this and I've got no idea what problem you solve or what you do. And this is this massive lost opportunity. So, you've got to be able to, you absolutely have to be able to actually solve a problem and be able to tell people about what it is. So, one of the things you talked about that I'm really fascinated by is you talk about how family caregivers are doing really complex tasks at
Oh,
home,
yes.
and they're getting very little training. I think you said only 20% of caregivers managing complex medical tasks have received training.
Oh, 60% are managing complex medical tasks, 20% are receiving medical training.
Okay, so great. So that's great clarification. So what I'm trying to figure out though is how big a problem it is. And again, I'm going to come back to a personal story. It was a very weird thing, but in the town I was growing up with, little town of Paradise in Northern California, you probably heard of it when it burned down a few years ago. I, as a teenager, from the time I was about 14 till my early 20s, I ended up being a caregiver for two different paraplegic or quadriplegics. And one of them was a polio victim on a rocker bed, which you probably never seen because they don't really use them anymore. But I was this teenage kid, sophomore, junior in high school, and I was suctioning his trach, and I was doing cath care, and I had very, very minimal training, and we just figured it out. And so, how big is it? Really a big problem? Or I mean, of course, people live longer and there's no more sophistication. So, talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I do think with things like AI that will heavily change sort of the issue, maybe the gravity of the situation. It'll make the situation a little bit different, because I think information is a little more accessible, and training is a little more accessible. But yeah, I mean, why people with no medical training are having to do feeding tubes for their parents, just kind of having to figure things out as they go. And there's just very little support for any kind of instruction or way to go about caregiving. And I think Yeah, that's definitely an area of innovation that needs to be developed.
So, what role do you see AI playing in all this? You talk about it. I'm a big fan of AI. Talk to me about how you see AI in the age tech world.
Um, well, I kind of have two takes on that. One, I don't think your company has to be AI. I think from a fundraising perspective, I think it does make it both easier and harder. But I'm thinking of companies like Pilaways, for example, which is an incontinence management product, and so they're sheets that you can just get rid of after. And yeah, just a very simple solution to a problem. So I'm actually I'm really a fan of very simple solutions to problems. I think that that a lot of founders are making problems more complicated than they have to be, and I think that leads to things like overbuilding and inaccessibility and things like that. So I am a very big fan of simple solutions. But with that said, yeah, I mean, there's just no doubt that AI is playing a big role in the way that innovation is taking place, especially investors love AI products. I think 75% of VC-backed companies last year were AI focused companies. So of course, it's when we're thinking about scaling, when we're thinking about fundraising and things like that, I think AI makes that very attractive. I think it also, you can do a lot more as a founder with a lot less with AI, and so I think it's also changed the way that startups are built. So I think that's also a huge shift as well.
Okay, cool. So, you're, I don't know how old you are. You're a lot younger than I am. You've got probably a few years before you're going to go into senior living, but this is sort of like one of my favorite questions. Jada, who's producing, probably a little younger than you, but much more closer to your generation than mine. But you're probably not hardly. You sort of have this picture that someday maybe you're going to get old and have to deal with those changes that come with it. Tell me about your dream senior living community that you'd be willing to move into when you get to be 75 or.
Sorry, the last part cut off a little bit. But
I think we're back.
Okay.
Are you there?
Yes.
Did you get my question?
So dream.
Your dream senior living when you get to be 75 or 80 or 85 or 90, what's that going to look like?
So I really love the term joy span, which is about measuring life not by just how long you live, and then not measuring it by just your healthy years, but by how much joy that you're experiencing in life. So I think senior living that really embraces that idea of joy, I think, well, those are the kind of places that I would want to live. So places that foster community, places that are experimental. I think that's also a really big one. In Korea, we have places called elder kindergarten. So adult children send their parents to. It's kind of a daycare center, but it's a little more sophisticated than that. But I just think, and I was just talking to my relative who does that, and her mom gets on a bus every morning and she waves to her friends. She goes there, she comes back with arts and crafts projects. I mean, I think for me, a strong sense of community and just being able to do art and continue learning are going to be sort of the key components of what'll make a happy home for me.
Okay, cool. So you get to look at a lot of technology. We've talked about some good stuff. What are some dumb things you've seen? where somebody has said, "Oh, I got this great idea," and you just go, "What is wrong with that person?"
Well, I think for one, and I've seen countless startups where their product or service is so incoherent. I don't get what it is until I've maybe chatted with the founder for 30 minutes. So that's the first problem, is maybe that's a byproduct of people who are overbuilding. So they're building kind of these all-in-one solutions, which really complicate, the purpose or what they're really trying to solve for. So any product that's incoherent, I think is just actually the worst one, just because, I mean, you just don't even know what problem you're solving for. So maybe that's the first one. The second one, I think founders who don't really understand how many friction points their product really has. So, for example, I think the winners of this is people who have created, I'm sorry? People have created products that don't require Wi-Fi or don't require downloading. I think those founders are the ones that will really win the next 12 months and decade, really, is because they've really understood how to remove those friction points. So startups that aren't really thinking seriously about that is, I think, also not setting themselves up for success.
Yeah, I this is a really important this is a real question. I think that I'm actually just doing a little camera adjustment here because I seem to be the problem on the lag here. So hopefully that'll make it better for the last couple minutes. But I do think that complexity is a huge problem. I have a tool where, oh, it makes my head real narrow, doesn't it? But anyway, we'll get through this. I have this a good friend of mine who sent me a tablet to do dementia type activities with my stepfather, and conceptually, I really like it a lot. It has made I get it to work a little bit, but it's not great, and it's just too complex and too hard to use. And so I think that's super important. So I've got senior living operators. They're watching this. They're fascinated by technology. And they're trying to figure out what they're supposed to do with technology to serve their residents, to serve their family members, to serve their team members. We haven't really talked about team members. So they're watching this on Tuesday morning, I guess Tuesday afternoon if you're on the East Coast. And they're going to think about it for a few days. They're going to get back to their community next Monday morning. What should they be doing differently or thinking differently about technology and their residents and families and team members?
Well, I think the first thing that operators are naturally going to do are gravitate towards tech that'll really cut down on operational costs, especially when it comes to workforce and staffing shortages. So I think first, founders really need to be addressing those pain points. And I think operators are really going to be investing in those products first. And then when we're able to make senior living more accessible, more affordable, higher quality, hopefully through the acceleration of innovation in those areas, then we can move into, I think, more experimental ones. I'm thinking of this one founder who has a music product, so music that soothes patients with dementia. I'm thinking of dementia companion products. There's a lot of, I think, innovation that people are trying to get into senior living. I think it's just that's not going to be the priority in the near future. I think operators are going to be focusing more on things that cut on operational costs. But after that, yeah, so many fun products. I think we can really look forward to startups bringing in really creative ideas in the next decade.
So I love that. We're about out of time. So one more question for you. You're calling 2026, sort of the next big care transformation, what's going to exist in 26 that doesn't exist in 25?
What's going to exist in 2026 that didn't exist?
Doesn't exist now, or doesn't exist in 2025?
I think, well, first, I think the conversation is really going to change around aging. I think it's going to become a lot more human. I think there's going to be a huge shift in the way that we think about aging, the way we think about retirement, redesigning the way we think about the latest years of our lives, redesigning that. I think there'll be a lot of different narratives that will form around aging, positive narratives around aging. And I think that's going to be in 2026. And like I said, the way that we think about caregiving, taking that as a serious demographic, a population of and a legitimate workforce. So I think 2026 will see a lot of differences in the ways that we talk about aging, caregiving, longevity. So, and hopefully that leads to, changes in policy and changes the way that founders are thinking about their products as well.
Cool. So tell us a little bit. I want to give you the last sort of minute to talk a little bit about where to find you, how do people follow you, how do people get in touch with you, what you're working on.
Yeah, the biggest thing, if people could visit www.agetechjournal.com and add your startup to my AgeTech startup tracker. It's really a way to comprehensively map out the different startups that are moving in and emerging in the space. And I think that'll be a really valuable project for just to give us the bigger picture of AgeTech and the AgeTech ecosystem. So that would be a really great place to start and support that project. Otherwise, please follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to our newsletter. I interview some of the biggest voices in AgeTech and offer their valuable insights. So yeah, newsletter, website, AgeTech tracker.
Cool. Jane, thank you very much for joining us. Have a great week. I love your passion for AgeTech. I think it is so important. I think it will change the lives of so many people. So it's been a great, great conversation. And I'll see you back. It's interesting. We're talking about innovation in senior living. Great guests on Friday. I've got Dr. Bill Thomas and Joel Theisen from LifeSpark, and it will be a crazy conversation. You should be there and join us. And again, Jane, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.